Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
I'm Cindy Lauper with fellow Cosentix advocate, Chef Michelle Bernstein.
We'll share our experiences with plaque psoriasis, with psoriatic arthritis, and Dr. Panico will talk about the possible connection.
Cosentix secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis 300 milligram dose and adults with active psoriatic arthritis 150 milligram dose. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentix. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur.
Learn more at 1-844-COSENTIX or Cosentix.com/Cindy.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, who seems already to be in even unusually more chipper mood than he is on a normal day, the way he just flamboyantly directed me to start the pod with a big... Do you know what, everybody? He's really pleased with himself because he's just loaded the washing machine. And you see that chuckle? That's how happy he is. He's loaded the washing machine correctly under the Baroness's guidance. Well done, Kieran.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm very excited because it's the Great Escape Music Festival in Brighton, which is taking place over 3 days, and it's sort of it's indie granddad's heaven. So I'm seeing bands like Abdomen, Slag, and Grumpy Uncle, and I can't wait.
Do you know what, Kieran? I would prefer a band take a few more minutes to come up with a name. I'm sure they're very good, but Abdomen, Slag, and Grumpy Uncle. I mean, I can guess what sort of band they are.
Yes.
And it's probably because they're called Abdomen, Slag, and Grumpy Uncle that they're playing in the back room of a pub in Brighton.
Yes.
I just can't see the words Abdomen and Slag over the O2 somehow. It was lovely to see you last night, Kieran. We had our Q&A, our monthly Q&A with our club members. It was a very pleasant evening, very funny. Actually, genuinely made me laugh. I don't like it when civilians make me laugh, but when we were discussing the fact that one of them liked real ale and one of the others said, "Sure, that's Real ale," it genuinely made me laugh. And also, Kieran, our club members who were on our live Q&A got an exclusive last night. They were the first to hear the news about the ducklings because we were contacted by a proper vet, a proper James Herriot-style vet, who informed us why you can't put ducklings in the water without their mum. Also implied that it was wrong of us to, or you, us, I only joined at the hip for the pod, but it was wrong of you to rip the ducklings away from the loving wings of their mum in the first place. But apparently ducklings can go in the water as early as they like if their mum's with them, because their mum's wings exude some kind of lanolin which protects the ducklings' wings. But otherwise, if they haven't got their mum, they can't go in water for quite some time. So you were, in fact, correctly advised, Kieran.
Yes, I'm just wondering how many new listeners we've lost.
Already. Yeah.
Is it supposed to be... yes.
Yeah,
but the existing listeners will be absolutely delighted about the update.
Well, the new listeners may come back when they go, no, it's definitely Price of Football. I thought maybe I'd accidentally tuned into the Rest is Wildfowl by mistake. Ed started a fake podcast called "The Rest Is Vegetables," in the hope that he's determined to get some kind of litigation that he can then use in his next show. I'd listen to "The Rest Is Wildfowl."
Yes,
I'd listen
certainly.
to Gary, or if Gary Neville on the Overlap were to have a little wildfowl segment every week, I'll tune in for that. Robbie Savage, if 606 was wildfowl based
in Macclesfield.
In Macclesfield, obviously it'd be in Macclesfield. The Macclesfield Ducks would be better than any other Ducks in the world. It's Newsday, Kieran. We have some big news stories from all over the world and all over the Football League. But we start in the Premier League, Kieran, and we start with my club, in fact. And Guy has taken a particular angle on this narrative because his guy says John Textor faces competition for control of Crystal Palace from the New York Jets owner Woody Johnson. I do wish Americans sometimes, when naming their children, would remember that the British sense of humour is slightly different to theirs. I'm not entirely sure I want my club to be owned by somebody called Woody Johnson, but he was very visibly in attendance at a Palace match recently with Steve Parish and John Textor. But there's another narrative, which is there is a lot of people, journalists included, who think that John Textor may have brought Woody Johnson in to help him take control of Crystal Palace rather than Woody Johnson competing with John Textor. So I'd be interested to hear your take, obviously.
Yeah, I think we've said on a few occasions on the show that probably the best ownership model for a football club is that of a benign dictator or benevolent dictator, someone who's got the best interests of the club and is able to implement their ideas. What you've got at Palace is conflict. There is clearly a breakdown in relations between Steve Parish and John Textor. Steve Parish has his vision for the club. He has the benefit of, despite just being a 10% shareholder, he's one of the 4 directors, and it's one vote per director. So it's not linked to the. I seem to remember an old Not the 9 O'Clock News sketch where votes were done for trade unions based on what are we going to have for lunch, and it was based on the number of votes that they had from their membership. So this is sort of quite democratized. And in addition to that, should there be a split, Steve Parish has the casting vote. So unless the 3 American investors all vote in concert, then Steve Parish is effectively kingmaker here. John Textor publicly is saying some things in terms of he's frustrated at not being out of as much input over the development of Selhurst Park in terms of player recruitment and so on. The why owners should get involved in the signing of individual players has always slightly baffled me, unless the owners are bringing something to the table there. So that's where we are. There are certainly a couple of stories going. But first of all, that Textor wants to buy out Blitzer and Harris, who own 36% of the shares. If you added that to Textor's 45, that effectively gives us the power through what we normally refer to as special resolutions. If you can get more than 75% of the votes, you can sometimes force things through a little bit easier. But the big unknown is the price. So are Blitzer and Harris willing to sell their shares? The answer there is almost certainly. Is Textor going to offer them enough money to make it worth their while? We're uncertain of that. And I think there's a third issue. Does John Textor have the resources to do this? If anybody's been following the activities of Eagle Holdings, which is John Textor's investment vehicle, it's been bumping around. There's a really good guy on Twitter called Greg Cordell. He's an American guy, and he does these incredibly intricate diagrams of the setups of individual boards of directors and investors and so on. And he's been keeping us up to date on all clubs, but in Eagle Holdings in particular. There's been one or two things which make you wonder, are things as good at Eagle Holdings as perhaps you'd like them to be? And that's brought into question the introduction of Woody Johnson. Now Woody Johnson is 78 years old. So, if he wants to get involved in football, and this is, and I wish him, as we all do, of course, I wish anybody a long and healthy future. But you would think it would be a person in a hurry. One viewpoint is that Steve Parish is trying to persuade him to buy out all three of the other US investors. And presumably Steve Parish would stay on as chairman, and Woody Johnson would be the power behind the throne. The other viewpoint is, as you mentioned, that could he come in alignment with John Textor if John Textor doesn't have the resources? I was at a meeting a couple of days ago, and somebody was talking through the owners and directors test, somebody that's actually buying a club, and just how detailed it is. So if John Textor is thinking about buying out the other two, he's got to be able to provide evidence that he has the money, and B, where the money comes from, and then C, that he's got the money to run Crystal Palace for a few years. He has had some ups and downs in terms of his ownership. So it's a complicated situation, and it's in my view, it's a very minor distraction. I think if you're a Palace fan, your concentration, of course, of this week is going to Wembley, and from your point of view, winning the FA Cup and all of the memories that brings.
I'm trying not to think about that, Kieran. I managed to get through yesterday. There was a whole period of 3 minutes where I didn't think about it, which was fantastic. The other issue is if we do win the FA Cup, it makes us much more attractive to an American owner or another American owner, full stop. There's certain, this is entirely gossip, but I understand through various people in and around the club that Harrison Blitzer would only be too pleased to get out, but they want a considerable return on their original investment. I understand as well, Kieran, one of our people on the Q&A last night said there'd been some activity at Company's House in terms of new share issue at Palace, £10 million raise.
That's right, yes. So Palace Holdco, which there's Palace Holdco, Palace Midco, then there's CPFC 2010, which is effectively the football club. So it is a tiered arrangement, which is very common. There's nothing Machiavellian in this. It did issue £10 million of new shares in the last day or two, and we don't as yet know to whom those shares have been issued. It was a very strange number of shares. It wasn't a round number. They were issued at a very strange price. So that sort of suggests to me that it could be that the four owners have agreed to put in perhaps £10 million of working capital into Crystal Palace, but they all retain their same percentage shares. So Steve Parish will still have 10% and Textor will still have 45%, and perhaps they've managed to get that one over the line, with a view to at some point in the relatively near future having a broader issue in terms of the club's ownership.
And in terms of John Textor's company, there are two things here. It can't be doing that brilliantly because they were struck off from Company's House, weren't they, a couple of weeks ago? I know, albeit for an administrative error, but also when it comes, if Textor was to launch a takeover bid and the Premier League were doing their fit and proper persons test, are they able to look at what's happened to his clubs around the world? So, because Lyon are very much struggling financially, can they take that into consideration, or can they only consider his financial situation in this country?
No, it would be because we do have global investment. They would be looking at they would be looking at the investors' portfolio of wealth globally rather than domestically, because there is so much international investment as far as the club is concerned. With the Eagle Holdings striking off notice, I used to get a bit giddy about these in days gone by. But actually, they tend to be more common than you think. And it's normally due to arrogance, incompetence, complacency, rather than anything to worry about. I.e., there's something called a confirmation statement, and effectively it's an annual update as to who owns what in the company. And it's you send it off each year. It costs you £12. Half the time, nothing's happened. And I know myself, you sometimes forget. My only concern is that if you are a professional outfit, as opposed to, I run my own company, I'm a one-man band. If you are a larger organisation, you would think that they would have a company secretary whose responsibilities would include activities such as these, and therefore a slightly greater degree of professionalism.
I tell you who did get giddy about him being struck off, Kieran, that's Palace fans. Because most Palace fans not having your insight into these things were just like, well, he's done, he's gone. I did try and tell a couple of them, but even I wasn't entirely sure of my own ground, to be perfectly honest, Kieran. So I just told them to listen to the pod. Now, Chelsea owner Todd Bowley, it seems that Chelsea are getting a new ground, Kieran, but Chelsea fans don't need to hold their breath.
Yeah, put this one into your iPhone diary, Chelsea fans. 2042 is a possible date for a new stadium. Now, to be fair to Todd Bowley, he was
say that again.
He was at one of these panels.
Sorry, Kieran, say that again.
Yeah, fair to Todd Bowley, whose company Vivid Seats this morning is advertising tickets for the Europa Cup final at £22,738 each.
Wow!
Each to watch the 16th and 17th teams in the Premier League play for a chance to win the European equivalent of the Rumbelows Cup, and
and Champions League qualification.
Champions League qualification is the financial issue, but that ultimately what the competition is. So there are rumblings at Chelsea. Todd Bowley has said we're not going to make a decision until the end of the season. We're almost at the end of the season, so again, it seemed a bit of a strange thing to say, almost as strange as Chelsea getting a front of shirt sponsor for the last 2 games of the season.
Yeah,
that's a strange one. That I'm sure it's a fantastic price, and whoever's negotiated it, it's done very well. So he says there are complications. That the 2 options are expansion of Stamford Bridge or move to a new site. But Hans-Jörg Wyss, who is a co-owner of Chelsea, and people forget, they think it's just Clearlake Capital and Todd Bowley, but there are some minority investors. He commented, we need to get the stadium issue sorted, but there appears to be nobody at Chelsea willing to drive this forwards. Now, could this be is that it's going to take 15 to 20 years, and therefore the people in charge of the club, private equity is normally looking at a 3 to 5 year exit route. So why get involved in all of the costs, all of the aggravation of a new stadium, if we don't intend to be here in 2042, and therefore we're not going to put the effort in yet. Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has said Stamford Bridge ain't big enough. Come and have a chat with us. We will assist if we can. If there are barriers to expansion, if there are barriers to developing a new ground, which is an interesting viewpoint. I'm sure that there are people living in London who would not necessarily welcome a football stadium or a bigger football stadium. So all stakeholders' views have to be taken into consideration. But I think Todd Bowley is being fair in that he acknowledges that should they go for an expansion of Stamford Bridge, there will be a lot of unhappy local residents. And for people not familiar with where Chelsea are located, it's not just in London, it's in a very, very desirable place in London. Real estate prices are extremely high, so therefore the type of neighbour that Chelsea Football Club have tends to be quite wealthy, they tend to be quite connected, and they will have no qualms whatsoever in raising legal obstacles and objections for noise pollution in terms of if it's to be a major reconstruction exercise, in terms of light pollution if it's an expanded stadium and so on. Impact on their property prices and so on. It's not going to be necessarily as easy as some of the stadium expansions we've seen elsewhere, which have been on brownfield sites, or if they have been in residential areas, perhaps the local properties are a much lower price point, and that's allowed the football club to buy them out.
Well, if it's not open till 2042, perhaps we could have a joint ceremony, because that will be the year Palace's new stand finally gets up, I imagine.
Yes.
I'm sorry I interrupted, Kieran, when you said to be you said to be fair to Todd Bowley. I was so taken aback by you using those words in the same sentence. It's just, I could see from the look in your face it was paining you. Two things off the back of that: 22,500. Now, it's Ruben Amorim I worry about here, because he's promised to pay the fares and the ticket prices for some of the Man United staff who haven't been given tickets. He might backtrack on that a little bit if the only 10 tickets he can get cost him £22,500 each. But this, I forgot completely to ask you about this Chelsea shirt sponsor deal, Kieran. I don't know who the company are, but there are a lot of people assuming that this is just the start of a deal for the next 2 seasons, or do you think this is a one-off 3-match deal?
It is a weird one. I think the company involved is a real estate company based in Dubai or somewhere else in the Middle East, and therefore could it be used as part of a Chelsea-linked development? For a block of apartments, where however you want to describe them. It's the timing is weird. You don't sell kit in April and May.
That's true.
If you bought your Chelsea shirt for 24-25, you either buy it at launch or you get it as a Christmas present or your birthday. Yeah. This stage, the vast majority of clubs, if they have any outstanding inventory, they're discounting it at 30, 40, 50, 60%. So to have this change is unusual, but then Chelsea and unusual transactions have become a common feature of the financial side of the club. So we await to find out what is going to happen on the back of this. It would be fascinating to find out the price that Chelsea have obtained. I'm sure it's been done at arm's length. I'm sure it's at the fair market value. No accusations are being made. It would be good if the club was a little bit more transparent on this.
Yeah, no accusations are being made, Kieran. But I'm hearing a hint of an implication here, Kieran. Is there any suggestion that this has anything to do with profit and sustainability rules?
Well, I think the answer in terms of Chelsea and profit and sustainability is very much a wait and see. There has been no white smoke or black smoke from the Premier League in the issue of the sale of the women's team at the end of June 2024. I have been told by friends of the show, senior sources, that it's not a closed book. The Premier League have not washed their hands of it, and to therefore wait and see. So if that is the case, and the Premier League say we don't really think this is appropriate, certainly at the £200 million price point, then there could be PSR issues arising. And Chelsea do have started the hairs running, because I'm aware of at least 2 other Premier League clubs who are now thinking of selling their women's teams to book a profit. Could they also, by pure coincidence, be under a bit of pressure PSR-wise? Not in a position to comment.
This episode is sponsored by Shopify. When we started The Price of Football and things started to take off, it all got a bit overwhelming at times as we were suddenly sorting out recordings, interviews, live shows, and our online store. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify.
Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. With Shopify, you get your own design studio that includes hundreds of ready-to-use templates. You can accelerate your content creation with Shopify's AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. And you can easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify.
Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/price of football, all lowercase. So go to shopify.co.uk/price of football to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.co.uk/price of football.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, we've got two big women's football stories coming up. Before that, Kieran, a couple of years back, your club, Brighton, and their owner, Tony Bloom, had links with one club in Edinburgh. And now it looks like they've got stronger links with the other one.
That's right. Tony Bloom, Brighton did have a sort of a knowledge exchange with Hibs. And Hibs are now owned by Bill Foley, who also owns Bournemouth, who had a very good season, playing some really good football as well. And Tony Bloom has now put in a £10 million bid for a 29% stake in Hearts. Now, the 29%, I think, is important from the point of view is that if you have more than 30%, you are deemed to have a significant influence from a UEFA perspective. So I think he's gone below the 30% threshold, because if Hearts and Brighton both qualify for Europe and end up in the same competition, he would then have to divest his shares. It has not yet been approved. It has to go to a vote of existing shareholders. We've got the Hearts Foundation, which is effectively the fan-owned group. So I think they're going to take their particular counsel. The benefits is that Tony Bloom, I've only been in conversation with him once. I still maintain he's the cleverest person I've ever met, and I'm not saying that because I'm a Brighton fan. He is super smart. I think he wants to be a disruptor as far as Scottish football is concerned. What can he bring to the table? If you take a look at one of the companies which he's involved in, which is called Jamestown Analytics, they are the nerds in terms of the analytical approach, the metrics which they use to spot talent. And does he want to do something similar to what's happened at Brighton, but at a different price point? I would imagine so. Could this challenge the stranglehold that Celtic are well ahead of Rangers, both on and off the field? And I'm not saying that from a partisan point of view whatsoever, but even Rangers fans will acknowledge that. Rangers, I think, will be first in the sights of Hearts and then Celtic. But the advantages that the two Glasgow clubs have financially, they do qualify for Europe on a much more regular basis. They have got bigger stadiums. They have got huge fan bases, both clubs. Does give them a huge financial advantage. Can you challenge that? Possibly. It would be an amazing achievement if it can be done.
Well, Hibs, a very good friend of mine, is a Hibs fan. I've always had a soft spot for Hibs, but they've had a fantastic season. Hibs, is that arguably off the back of Bill Foley's investment? And has Bill Foley only got a 29% share in Hibs as well, as does he own more?
I'll have to check that up, actually. I think he might have, his might be a wee bit more. But the 30% issue is something from a UEFA point of view. And it could be that when he bought into this, it wasn't a consideration. I think Bournemouth are a very well-run club. And again, that knowledge exchange, by all accounts, Jamestown Analytics were responsible for bringing in the coach into Hearts. And it's fair to say that that's not worked. So, these things are hit and miss, and no matter how good your algorithms are, there are still issues of relationships, the ability to improve players on an individual or a collective basis, which don't always work out.
I'm interested as well, Kieran, to hear you say that Tony Bloom wants to be a disruptor in Scottish football. Is that genuinely, you think, his motivating force behind it? There's no financial gain for him? Is he already too rich for that not to be an issue? He just really wants to shake up Scottish football, and is using his incredible analytical data skills, has spotted that there might be ways of challenging the traditional top two.
I think there's 101 ways that Tony Bloom could spend £10 million and get a much quicker and a much greater chance of a financial return on 10 million quid. So I don't think that is a motivation. He has bought into Melbourne Victory as well in Australia. His wife's from Australia, so I think he spends some of the time there. There's going to be no link, as far as I can understand, between Brighton and Hearts, although we are seeing increased links between English and Scottish clubs, partly as one of the fallouts from Brexit and the inability to recruit 16 and 17-year-olds from Europe. So therefore targeting the Scottish market is seen as a strategic step by some clubs. But I don't think there's any indication here. This is supposed to be a sort of an independent project of Bloom's.
Right. Okay, that's interesting, because I was going to say, from the point of view of Hearts fans, is this unequivocal good news, or will there be some of them thinking we don't really want to be a junior part of Brighton's multi-club organisation?
No, I don't think that will be an issue whatsoever. There will be your separate budgets, and Brighton are actually quite good at making money, so therefore they don't need additional money from the sort of having not a franchise or even a junior club. Hearts will be independent and deemed to be of equivalent status.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I don't want Tony Bloom to spend his money on, Kieran. That's more racehorses. I've had several occasions this year. I very rarely put money on a racehorse, but I still love watching the races. And there's several occasions when I've been going, "Go on, that horse looks good." And then, hang on a second, what are those colours? For the love of God, somebody catch that horse. Kieran, going to Rotherham the week before last and doing our live Q&A last night, I'm still quite surprised. Obviously, I'm my realm is within the boundaries of the M25, which makes it sound much bigger than it actually is. My realm is a small corner of South London. He said South East London, then Christ. But I was very surprised in Rotherham 2 weeks ago and last night at the amount of antipathy there is out there to Salford City from fans of clubs at a similar level. I can understand it, but Salford City really seems to be taking on the mantle of the beast as far as they're concerned. But Salford City fans have got a new ownership group, but so the band is back together, Kieran, but with a different name, essentially. It's a long way of saying that, but they've got a new ownership group. But with the same people.
Yeah. Well, it's not quite the same people. It's some of the same people. So I'm going to do some shameless name dropping. Now, I was with Gary Neville and Paul Scholes yesterday.
Were you?
And I was. This clearly was an issue which came up in conversation. So what's happened at Salford City is that historically it was owned 40% by Peter Lim, the Singapore businessman who also is the owners of Valencia, where I think Gary Neville was the manager.
But he was,
albeit relatively briefly. And he has been a very generous owner. And then there's been the class of 92 owned 10% of the club each. So the two Neville brothers, Nicky Butt, Ryan Giggs, David Beckham, and so on, and Paul Scholes. And they've all put money into the club. Salford City has been losing a lot of money, and there's now been a change of tack. So I think Phil Neville, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, and Ryan Giggs are moving on. They're leaving. But they've effectively written off the money that they put into the club. So they're not being any outstanding debt. But David Beckham and Gary Neville are now part of the ownership group, and they've brought in 6 or 7 new owners. Everybody's going to own between 5 and 10%. I think that's interesting. Going back to what we were saying earlier in terms of the Crystal Palace ownership, is that going to work? Well, it then becomes an issue of egos. Do some of these external investors, are they going to delegate the responsibility of running the club on a day-to-day basis to, I think Nicky Butt is actually sort of effectively the chief exec. I don't know what his future role is going to be, and so on. And they are also keeping 20% of the shares effectively outstanding for further external investment. So the total amount of money coming into the club, I believe, is somewhere between 10 to 15 million pounds. The existing debts owed to the owners, which are close to 30 million pounds, are being written off, and they're going with a clean slate. And certainly the issue which you raised, which again I've been part of a discussion with, is there resentment towards Salford City? There certainly was when this project started in 2014, because they were being watched by 50 to 100 people. And therefore, you only need a little bit of money to accelerate a club through the leagues. Looking at the figures I've got in front of me, Salford City now probably have 7th or 8th biggest budget in League Two. So they're not in a position to do a Wrexham or a Stockport in terms of being able to blitz the rest of the division. But yes, there is still a niggly feeling towards the club because they've not suffered in the way. And that's what if you think about what we think about as football fans, it's not the moments of enjoyment, it's the moments of suffering that bind us. I think anybody who was watching the Coventry versus Sunderland match last night, you were watching the football, and then they were doing these cuts during extra time to both the Sunderland fans and the Coventry fans. There was no joy in anybody's face. Everybody was either looking through their, hands across their eyes. They were grimacing every time the ball goes into their half from the opponents. They were starting to genuinely sort of look fearful. And clearly, the finish of the match was sensational. It's the theatre that we all crave. Whether you're supporting the winning side or the losing side, it was a memorable moment in football as far as this season is concerned. But it's that misery, and if you're a League Two supporter and you've been in there for a few years, there is this feeling of who do you think you are? You don't deserve to be here, Salford City, and I don't think that's necessarily warranted because, as Gary Neville said, he's watched every single Salford City game, even if he's doing a commentary for Sky, he'll be watching the match on a feed. I do believe that they are genuinely completely invested in this, and it's not a vanity project.
Well, it's an interesting one, Kieran, because after the Rotherham gig, I was being berated very nicely by one of the people in the audience who supports a local National League team and was telling me how evil Salford were. But it's one of those things we think, well, I'm a long way out of my comfort zone here, so I'm just going to nod politely and dream of Thornton Heath until I get back to the hotel. But also, I did want to say to him that Salford, if they have been buying success, that's sort of come to a grinding halt because they haven't had much considerable success recently. And also, I know from you telling me that they're losing an awful lot of money every week, but yet there is still this, they're just the Manchester United of non-league football or lower league football. It's almost as though, because they're owned by people that are involved in Manchester United, they therefore have the same arrogant approach that the Glazers have had in the past 10, 12 years.
Yeah, no, that's I think, I've never spoken to him before. They came across very genuine, both Gary Neville and Paul Scholes. There's no side to Paul Scholes. He is textbook Northern man.
Yeah, I would urge anybody who doesn't like Gary Neville not to meet him, because he's a genuinely pleasant, intelligent bloke,
and he's very funny.
And he's very funny, and he's very aware of his own image as well, which is refreshing. So that's a club that have brought people in. Watford, Kieran, are a club that are shifting people out following the departure of the manager, Tom Cleverley.
Yes. So Watford have announced that there's going to be some senior job losses. I've been told that it's going to be no more than 4, but it is going to be at quite a high level.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're talking about football on the coaching side here, or on the non?
No, this is non-football. Tom Cleverley, the coach, he's gone. And if you go, your coaching staff tend to go with you. They tend to come and go as a unit. But this is people involved in the management side of the club. Watford have been through some. Let's be honest, they've been through some tough times. The parachute payments are finished. They have made profits in the last couple of years, but that's been very much driven by player sales, that's part of the issue. We've got to be honest. There was according to them, a technical issue last month, which resulted in wages being very shortly delayed. The optics don't look great on that. They had their share scheme, which effectively collapsed when they were trying to offer non-voting shares with intangible benefits. And after there was initial some interest that died. They didn't raise the money from that. I've been told that the owner wants to shake things up, and he's re-energised. And it very much sounds like a press release. This, and I think the club said if the club's to achieve its aims on and off the pitch, it was felt a restructuring in both areas was essential. My concern with this constant reference to the word change is not the same as improvement, and I think this is one of a common misconception amongst, and we're as guilty of this as fans. If the club's not doing well, change the manager. Doesn't mean get a better manager, just get a different manager. And you look to see what's happened at Leicester City this season. Well, okay, they changed their manager, things didn't get any better. Southampton changed their manager, things didn't get any better. Change the manager again, things don't get any better. It's for me, it's always a bit of a smokescreen in terms of what we all want. We all want our club to do better, but you can't have 20 clubs getting better, because 3 clubs are still going to get relegated, and there's going to be 3 or 4 clubs who felt that they should have got into the Champions League and won't get into the Champions League, and you get knocked out of the FA Cup because not everybody can win it. So there have been changes at the senior level. Some fans will point out that the Watford chief executive is on $955,000 a year, and that seems quite high for a sort of a mid-table. I believe he's taking a pay cut. But there will be eyebrows raised as a result of this.
Would it be fair to say, though, Kieran, that had Watford been promoted or got into the playoffs, that these 4 staff would still have their job? Or is it? My question is it part of a financial retrenchment, or is it simply, as the owner says, he wants to shake things up a little bit?
Well, you're always given a target at the start of each season. But if you take a look at Watford's accounts in recent years, what you do see is substantial outflows of players. So if you're going to get rid of your best players and you're still setting the coach and the other, the non-playing managers the task of getting into the playoffs, is that a reasonable thing to set? Because you are linked to the quality of the resources that you've got in front of you. And we've seen that Watford have recruited some very good players, but they now tend to be former players who are applying their trade elsewhere.
Yeah, I have to say that, Kieran, despite my rationing myself to one Sunderland till I die every 2 days, I've now finished it. I came to it very late. I just felt it was amazing. But the trouble is now, every time I hear a story about a Championship club or a League One club, I just imagine it playing out Like now, I imagine a posh chap in red corduroys throwing stuff at the wall, saying, "Not good enough, guys! Not good enough." And I'm
He's
sure
now in Jamaica.
So we learned last night.
Yes.
He was, I have to say, Charlie, quite popular at Charlton though, and did a reasonable job there. So I'm not saying that the people involved in making a TV show would edit things to make somebody look slightly different as to they are, except I am, because I know the bloke who produced and directed it. So, but it was fascinating. Just a really, I would urge anybody who's not caught up with that show yet, who's got any interest in how a football club and team is run, and I still don't understand what in God's name were they thinking of when they allowed that degree of access. It's incredible.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
BTW, FYI. Visit Nexplanon.com RN to learn about Nexplanon. It's an adjustable implant, 68 milligrams radio pain. Or ask your HCP IRL. Okay, TTYL.
We've spoken a lot about Accrington Stanley lately, Kieran, and this is a big story coming from there.
Yes, and it's a sad story. Accrington Stanley are closing their academy. It costs money to run. This is a sideshow, but it's certainly linked to the ongoing dispute between the club and Hyndburn Council, who we know that there's been some local council changes across the country recently. And there's been an increase in votes for. We've now got reform councils. I think Hyndburn is the only council run by the curtain twitching party, and they don't seem very keen on football, despite saying that they are disappointed with the decision, saying that they put some money into the academy and so on. Andy Holt, who is the club owner, he says, "Look, I've committed." In his head, he says, "I've committed myself to putting $250,000 a year in."
Yeah.
And Andy runs a local company. It makes plastic boxes. Yeah. He is not that wealthy that he can put in millions and millions. But but there's absolutely nothing wrong with what we would call a traditional club and owner relationship. It's the one which we grew up on, after all. His view is that the decision by the council to prevent the club from having evening activities is going to increase the losses. Certainly the losses in 23-24 were far more than £250,000. He's effectively saying, I can't afford to run the academy, so therefore it's a business decision. And it's one, I get messages from Andy a few times every week, and we have a very civil relationship and a very respectful relationship. As far as I'm concerned, I think very highly of Andy. There are things which we vehemently disagree upon as well, but there's nothing wrong with that. You should always be willing to respect other people's views. He's sad and frustrated at things that have come to this. It is a battle which is now being effectively fought through the media. And as go back to what our friend Nick DeMarco always says, negotiation is the best way of dealing with disputes. And even Winston Churchill, jaw is better than war. Get people around the table, find out what their views are, find common ground, and try to resolve this.
Well, a terribly non-2025 thing to say, Kieran, respecting other people's opinions. What's the matter with you? If only more people would do that, very more people would go, do you know what? That's a good point. I don't agree with it, but you've made a fair point. And now, shall we shake hands and have a drink? Rather than throwing that drink over each other and it just drives me up.
You don't want lime and soda thrown over you.
No, that's true. I wouldn't. You can throw any other alcoholic drink over me because I'll be able to catch a splash. But no, don't throw lime and soda over me. It'll be like throwing the water over the witch in the Wizard of Oz at the end. Super agent Jorge Mendes, Kieran, has obviously been getting the little brown envelopes from the Portuguese equivalent of HMRC.
He has. Yes, there are allegations that he has been putting money through a company owned by his wife, and as a result of that has ended up saving millions upon millions of pounds in tax. He vehemently denies these allegations. But as a sign of goodwill, Kevin, he's paid a £15 million sum to the Portuguese tax authorities. And we've seen famous people who have done nothing wrong. Prince Andrew, for example, comes to mind. To give just because they're good people, to give large sums to other parties without an admission of guilt. He is a very successful agent. He has unusually close links with some clubs, which is absolutely fine, and he finds them players who, by coincidence, tend to be players under his representation, but that's just a coincidence. And he's become very wealthy as a result of that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I've always defended the rights of agents to act in the best interests of their clients or the best interests of clubs. My only issue is sometimes you wonder whether the agents are acting in the best interests of themselves first and foremost, and I'm not in favour of that. But there's no allegations towards Jorge Mendes on that.
Yeah, 15 million quid's a lot of goodwill in it.
It is, yes.
Yeah, I would go Christmas card, just show a bit of goodwill. But old Ethel down the road, put a Christmas card through her door. I think if I was to put 15 million quid through her door, she'd think there's a bit too much goodwill. What's he after? I like the cut of the jib of the Union of European Clubs, Kieran, who are asking UEFA to do something which is so obvious and charitable that they will obviously say no.
Yes, the UEC is an alternative to the European Club Association. So the ECA now has an awful lot of members, but only a few of them have votes. This is non-democracy in action. And the ECA tends to look after the interests of the bigger clubs. So what the UEC is doing is going to UEFA and UEC. I think Crystal Palace are involved. Steve Parish was one of the people, and certainly I've been talking to some people at UEC, and they're saying we need to take a look at the distribution of money. Now, there are things called solidarity payments that UEFA give to individual football associations, but how that is then divided, what exactly are we rewarding? And what the UEC is suggesting is we take a look at these players who are producing amazing football. And anybody who saw the Barcelona versus Inter Milan.
Oh my God!
Match. That was liquid football.
Both of them. What incredible games of football. Both of them.
And that's what we want to see. But some of those players, they've come from elsewhere. So what the UEC is saying is take 5% of your broadcast and commercial money, put that into a separate pot, and then say, okay, who are the clubs that have been successful in Europe? Where have they recruited players from? And effectively give a development fee, a finder's fee. And what will this do? This will encourage clubs. We've just been talking about Accrington Stanley closing their academy. Well, this will reward those clubs that have had academies, have developed talent, and that talent's gone on. And I think you can certainly see the merits in that. It is sort of very egalitarian. there is an element of romance about it as well, and you can see all of the positives. The negatives is in the eyes of the big clubs. Why should we? Yeah. And if you talk to executives of the elite clubs in Europe, they say nobody cares about the small clubs. They're just interested in us. We want to keep all of the money. And effectively, sort of, a repetition of the mantra that we saw during the introduction of Super League. So that's the suggestion. It will be interesting to see UEFA's response. UEFA has made an awful lot of concessions towards the elite clubs with the expansion of UEFA's own competitions and so on to try to head off Super League 2. How they respond to this is a classic wait and see.
My only caveat with this suggestion, Kieran, is that they should allocate at least 5% of those revenues to every lower league club. Because we've just heard about a lower league club that's had to close its academy for financial reasons. So this would help those clubs reopen their academies and then give them the chance to produce players. If you're only giving it to clubs who have produced players that are playing in major tournaments, then it's how do you define success? How do you define which clubs then have produced players that are good enough? So European football is awash with money, so it's just a very simple way of making sure that every club in Europe at whatever level gets a little cut of the pie. And Finley agrees with me because he's come back into here, Uncle Kevin, Kevin's on his high horse. Oh, I'm going to get. I would love to talk to somebody from the Union of European Clubs.
We will. Right. Well, somebody was in contact with me yesterday, so we will do what we can to arrange that.
And I'm also quite pleased to hear that in some circumstances, Steve Parish is pro the distribution of money from big clubs to smaller clubs. So I would look forward to that conversation. The two stories about women's football, Kieran, are at either end of the scale. First of all, it's going to be a worrying few days for Blackburn Rovers women.
Yes, the Venkies, who own Blackburn Football Club, it looks as if they're going to cut off financial support. If we take a look at what's happened in the women's game this year, attendances are down. And it has been through a growth phase. They're down by it's about 9%, I think, overall. The success that we saw at Arsenal in 23-24 has not been repeated to the same extent. They're still getting good crowds. So where does the women's game go in terms of the distribution of money? There's a new TV deal. There's new commercial deals. There's certainly a lot of goodwill. But is that being reflected in viewing numbers? Not necessarily. In attendances, again, not necessarily. Why is that? In my observation, I think there are parallels with the women's game and cricket in the sense that there's a lot of focus on the international team and the supply to that international team. As anybody that goes to watch county cricket will attest, isn't there, but you are there as a production line and giving people an opportunity and so on. So trying to get that sweet spot in terms of distribution between WSL and WSL2 in terms of the monies is an issue. And some clubs are doing the sums and they're realising that if we get promoted to what is the equivalent of the WSL Championship, we could be so far out of pocket that we don't think it's worthwhile doing. And Blackburn is a club which has, another thing, it's got monetary problems. The Venkies have been benevolent owners, but the Venkies have other priorities. And the taps at Blackburn, the level of financial support, I think is something which they are scrutinising very carefully at present.
I'm going to Surrey, Yorkshire on Friday. Just partly to get myself ready for the frenzied atmosphere at Wembley. I thought I'd throw myself into the febrile environment of the. I mean, this is hard. I don't know what happens if Blackburn can't prove they have the funds to stay in the Championship. I don't know where they get demoted to, but I understand that Blackburn aren't the only club in the Championship to have severed financial ties with the women's team. Is that correct?
That is right. I think a lot of clubs are doing a line by line review of their cost base, and for some owners, it's all about the men's team, and they gave support to the women's team. It's not making profits. The crowds that they were hoping for haven't materialised. The costs of running the women's team as a result of the increased professional in the game have increased, and the revenues have not increased to the same extent.
And yet, as you say, Kieran, we've got the Women's Euros coming up this summer. I should imagine every one of those games will be sold out. So at international level, there's still huge interest, and that's reflected in this story about the Women's World Cup.
Yes, it's going to match the men's team and go to a 48-team tournament. So that's the quantitative issue. I think we've got to be honest. What will it be like on a qualitative issue? I think there's been one or two reservations about the men's game increasing to 48, and remember there is also a proposal, I think, coming from Uruguay for it to increase to 64 teams as a one-off for the 2030 tournament. But that hasn't necessarily developed a lot of traction. This could affect I think this will be the 2034 tournament. Will you be able to get people turning up to watch the sides ranked 37th and 42nd? The simple answer is I don't know. There is. It's a World Cup, and if you take a look at the crowds that we saw in the United States in 1994, every match was sold out, even though it wasn't what you would call a football nation.
Yeah.
So if it's marketed correctly, then I think there is the opportunity to get decent crowds. You then have the opportunity to be able to go and to showcase women's international football all around the country, and the benefits that brings. And here's a suggestion: if it doesn't interest you, don't go and watch it.
Yeah.
But that's not the same as having it rammed down your throat.
Yeah,
and this is something I've never understood. I don't, say I've got no interest in Formula One, but I absolutely say to people, I don't really understand it. Got no interest in it. But I don't think it's rammed down my throat.
It's also it's very easy to avoid. We live in a multi-channel world. If you're furious that the BBC is showing a live WSL game at 1:00 on a Sunday afternoon, then you'll find another football game somewhere. If that's the only thing you can do at 1:00 on a Sunday afternoon is watch football. Otherwise, you can watch Paddington 2. That'll be easily available. There's plenty of options. Just really,
or repeats of the Avengers.
Oh, fantastic! The first tranche. I love that word, Kieran. The first tranche of tickets for next year's Men's World Cup have gone on sale, and they're so expensive. I can only assume Todd Bowley's involved.
£73,200. So dollars. So it's less. So it's less than I thought.
£73,100. And yeah.
Yes. So that is the highest. So these are the hospitality packages. They are the best seats in the house. It is for some of the flagship games, but it does show that FIFA are very much focused on the monetary side of the game. And I'll be honest, Kevin, they will sell, because there is a market for them. So FIFA's argument would be this is effectively dynamic pricing in existence. I think what is a bit more frustrating, we're now in May 2025. If you're interested in going to the World Cup in 2026, and myself and the Baroness, we both applied, but we don't. But tickets have not come up on sale. And having been to quite a few World Cups, and if somebody hasn't been, it's one of the things you want to tick off. It's not about the football. It's about it's a classic experience. And I really would, and it's not cheap, so I appreciate many people saying it's okay for him to say that. But I've been saving up for this for 2 years because it's the World Cup, and I'm a football mad. it's unusual that we've not made more progress in terms of an announcement, because if you don't, when you buy tickets for the World Cup, and anybody that's done this will agree, it's Group C and it's Team 1 versus Team 2. So you don't know who the participants are going to be. That's not the matter. You're going to the World Cup. You're going to be part of the greatest football tournament on the planet. But why FIFA haven't got their act together and have started to put them on general sale, or at least to encourage people to apply for individual matches and venues, is a frustration. Now, that could be due to the fact that there are ongoing discussions between FIFA and the United States authorities in terms of security, capacity of grounds, transport links, and so on. And it could be that we need to get those resolved first, which is understandable, and then we can actually start to get this show properly on the road.
Plus, as you alluded to a few weeks ago, some tax issues with some of the states in which the games are taking place. Also, I think people are slightly worried. I mean, it's a volatile part of the world at the moment, isn't it? People are waiting to make a decision. And also, I have to say this, and it gives me no pleasure to say so, I know a lot of people that were planning to go to the World Cup but don't want to put money into the economy of the United States of America at the moment, which is an issue, and you can't guarantee that the tickets you'll get will be in Canada or Mexico.
Yeah, and there could be complications, because what happens if Greenland qualifies for the tournament and it becomes the 51st state? You can't have two teams in the same country.
Well, that's true. Well, it came as some surprise to Donald Trump last week. I meant to phone you up when it was happening, that Donald Trump sitting next to Gianni Infantino was kind of your dream come true. And it came as some surprise when Donald Trump said, maybe Russia taking part in the World Cup will help peace talks in Ukraine, and Gianni Infantino had certainly not in it. Donald Trump was amazed to hear that Russia. What? You can see Gianni Infantino going, "We'll talk about it afterwards." Not the cameras are on now. I did mention, and I may have sounded flippant. I think it's an incredible, generous gesture from Ruben Amorim, the manager of Manchester United, where he said he would try and acquire tickets for club staff that haven't given to them for the Europa League, which is lovely. But the club have announced how they plan to celebrate should they win.
Yes. Good citizens of Gorton and Harper Hay, bring your own sausage. Because instead of having an open-top bus parade, which might cost the club a few quid, but only a few quid, Manchester United are planning to have a barbecue at their training ground should they win the Europa League. And this is following the decision made by Ineos and made by Jim Ratcliffe that members of staff who have helped to provide everything which assists the club on the pitch and therefore has contributed towards the club qualifying for the Europa League final, they normally get a ticket. Manchester United are saying this allows us to sell more tickets to our own fans, but this means that this allows Manchester United to make more money. So let's not. And we've had quite a few spins and press releases in this particular issue, and this is another sad one in terms of what's happening. We've always prided ourselves on not being a cynical show, Kevin. I just wonder whether the decision to not have an open-top bus parade is because it would take a wee bit of organising, and it might cause a disruption to Manchester United's post-season tour of Asia, which is worth £8 to £10 million for the club.
Yeah, very, very non-cynically put. And please, can we make "Bring Your Own Sausage" their catchphrase for the pod for the next couple of weeks? Bring your own sausage. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and more. And this time next week, there'll be another and more that we can tell you about, which is very exciting. You can do that by going to priceoffootball.com and clicking on join the club to sign up today. If you have a question you'd like answered on our weekly Tuesday questions pod, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on X, Twitter, and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on that same website, priceoffootball.com. We will be back on Tuesday with our customary questions pod. Hopefully I will still have a hangover by then, Kieran.
Yes, I hope so, yes.
If not, I will sulk my way through as like a professional. So in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, as always, to everybody that's been in contact, even during the course of this show. I think I've got 7 messages from supporters of the show on various topics. Looking at these, 4 of these are almost certainly libelous, and 3 of them are questionable.
Well, let's not read them out, Kieran, shall we?
No, I won't read them out. But they are much appreciated. So we are an independent show. We do rely on your support, and we're very grateful for the support in all of the different ways that you give it to us. Whether you are our secret veterinarian, our secret lawyers, and so on. But there's another way that you can support the show, and that is to give us a review using your apps. People say very, very kind and gracious things, but it doesn't matter to us. We've got thick skins, myself and Kevin, and you could even say you would rather have the show presented by the lead singers of Slag and Grumpy Uncle when they finished their time at The Great Escape. And we wouldn't mind one tiny bit.
Well, as long as they end their episode by shouting, "Bring your own sausage," I don't mind. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.